This podcast is sponsored by nobody.
Hey dudes, this is Bonnie Hayes. I sang Girls Like Me on the original Valley Girl soundtrack. You're listening to Tommy Throwback Kovac on Splat from the Past. He fucking rocks.
Hey dudes, welcome to Splat from the Past, the only 80s themed horror and sci-fi show where things can get totally radical. Now, I am so excited for today's guest because I will be talking to Liz Worth. Liz is a tarot reader, a rock journalist, and an 80s nerd. I first became aware of her a couple of years ago when Pleasant Gaiman had her on her podcast, The Devil's Music. And at first I was like, she seems nice, but, I couldn't find anything to relate to. I mean, she did write a book about punk rock in Canada, but that was about it. So then, just recently, I became aware that she has an 80s podcast called the Forever 80s Podcast. And the D&D Dynamite guys are going to be having her on soon, and they tagged her, and I was like, oh, wow, I had no idea that she had an 80s podcast now. I'm definitely going to reach out. And so we're just going to nerd out on 80s music and movies today, and I can't wait. Also, happy belated birthday, Karen Richmond, 3-time guest, and my favorite Gidget. Love you, Karen. Love your body laugh and your body mind. And happy birthday to last year's guest, Wendy Gazelle. Love you, Wendy. So, here is my interview with Liz Worth. Hey, Liz, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Good. Thank you so much. How are you?
I am fantastic. Yes. I can't tell you what a great honor this is. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Oh, thank you for asking me.
Absolutely. So, going back in time, did you gravitate toward journalism early on in your childhood?
Potentially. I I have a memory of trying to make a newspaper about cats when I was in grade 1. But I was always just really interested in writing overall when I was younger. I loved the idea of creating things and sharing things, and writing just seemed to be something that I had some kind of ability for. I wasn't good at a lot of other things like math and science and gym class. Those things were not for me. So I just started to pay attention to the things that seemed to be showing up for me really well.
Yeah, were you the kid who could relate to older adults, and so you were constantly asking questions because you wanted to know so much about the past?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I mean, my parents had me when they were 45. They were just about 4 months shy of turning 46. And so that was in 1982, which was quite unusual at the time. I know it's more common now for people to have kids later in life, but at the time it was unusual, and there was quite a generation gap, obviously, between me and my parents. They were born during the Great Depression, and so I always grew up with a little bit of a different, I think, perspective on life because of that. And they weren't particularly interested in popular culture. My mom really liked Elvis, and she liked Roy Orbison and Kenny Rogers. And we had records at home, but they weren't really interested in keeping up with the Joneses when it came to new technology or TV shows or movies or anything. So I was always kind of out of step with everybody else in my class. And I think that left me up to my own devices to just be able to gravitate towards the things that I was interested in rather than being influenced by, say, older siblings or younger parents or my peers.
Yeah, so your parents didn't have like a big box of old stinky vinyl records from the 60s and 70s?
I used to ask them because in the 80s there was a show called The Wonder Years that was quite popular, and I loved that show. And that show was all about 50s nostalgia. And so I used to ask my parents about what was happening in the 60s and if they liked the Beatles. And my dad would just sort of brush all that stuff off. He thought that the Beatles were quite silly, and my parents would just kind of tell me that they weren't really paying attention to what was happening in the 60s. They were just living their lives and going to work every day. And keeping things status quo. And so they really didn't gravitate towards a lot of pop culture or towards a lot of current events.
Yeah. Oh my God. I love the Wonder Years when I was a kid. It's still like one of my favorite shows. You know, it still holds up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just thought it was a great show. Yeah.
Yeah. So after high school, you attended Humber College?
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah. So you studied journalism there?
I did. Yes.
And did you know right away that you wanted to work in the rock field of journalism?
Again, it's hard to say. I have trouble doing just one thing,
Mm-hmm.
and I've always been like that. I've always just let my inspiration lead me to wherever it wants to go. And when I was in high school, I would make zines. I was really interested in zine culture, and in the '90s, that was where we found out a lot of things about different types of music and writers and other things that weren't always getting mainstream media coverage. And so I was always really inspired by zine culture and how a lot of the zines that I was reading covered everything. The people who would write them would have poets in there, or they would include their own poetry. They would have fiction. They would have music reviews.
Mm-hmm.
They would do a little bit of everything. And so I don't know if that rubbed off on me in some way, but I always grew up thinking that I was just going to be a writer who did a little bit of everything. And so music is one thing that I've always gravitated towards when it comes to writing, because I love documenting certain aspects of music, and I think that it's always interesting to me to ask why people do what they do. But I've never been able to only stick to music writing.
Yeah, so I was brought up never to ask a lady how old she is, but for the sake of generational context, I'm 40. How old are you?
Yeah, I'm turning 42. I was born in '82. So
Oh, good. Oh, good. Okay,
yeah.
so you're only a year older. That's awesome. Yeah, so like, I was an MTV kid from age 1 onwards. My dad had a tape that had like Van Halen's Jump video, Wang Chung's Dance Hall Days video, Ray Parker Jr.'s Ghostbusters, Bruce Springsteen's Dancing in the Dark. Those were all popular videos at the time, and that's where the seed was planted for me. And then VH1 The Big 80s educated me big time when I was 11. That's where I discovered Men Without Hats, Kajagoogoo, Mr. Howard Jones, and the Go-Go's. And I'm proud to say Gina Shock, the drummer, has been a guest twice on here. I fucking love her. Yeah, so like, where did it begin for you? Like, what were your favorite, like, synth-pop new wave bands?
For me, I think the 80s started for me probably more with the Smiths and Sisters of Mercy.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah. I was really into goth culture in the '90s, and a friend of mine gave me a mixtape one day, and she was obsessed with the Smiths.
Mm-hmm.
And she put a whole bunch of Smith songs on it, and then there was also some Sisters of Mercy on there. There was some Sex Gang Children on there. I think Tainted Love by Soft Cell was on there. I wish I still had this tape now so I could read off the full list, but these are the memories that I have from this. But she was the one who got me really into the Smiths, and I just, again, at the time, this was probably just after the mid '90s. Kurt Cobain had died, and grunge was kind of dying off. It wasn't really cool to be into the '80s at the time, and there weren't a lot of other kids in high school, at least in my high school, who were going back in time and listening to anything from previous eras. So, at first I was almost embarrassed. Like, I was like, I'm not supposed to like '80s music, but there were these bands that were so good, right? And so
Yeah.
I just sort of gave into it and just kept following that rabbit hole as time went on. But yeah, those are the bands that, for me, first drew me into the era.
Yeah, I know. I went through that shit too. I thought that I wasn't supposed to like the '80s either, but I never let it bother me. I mean, I liked some of the alternative rock that was coming out in the '90s, but it just felt like it was so dark and gloomy and depressing, and I just wanted to be happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it felt at the time like that era, that grunge era, was going to last forever, and it was a very potent moment. But it was, you're right, it was quite dark, and the '90s for me, I felt quite self-destructive as well. Like there was something that was really unbridled about the time, and a lot of the kids that I knew at the time also took a lot of, it seemed like people were taking things so literally sometimes, and in terms of their involvement in subcultures and how they were, what their reference points were to, to certain bands or artists that were big at the time, and sometimes it just felt like there was no there was a blurring of the lines, I think, between reality and illusion that was happening throughout the decade, and some people just seemed to really lose themselves.
Yeah, I know you're a Spoons fan. I've had Gordon on
Mm-hmm.
here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they were so good. They sounded British, you know? That's what I love about
Yeah,
them.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of there's a lot of Canadian music that seems to bridge that gap. I think Platinum Blonde is similar. Images in Vogue. They have a very British sound to them.
Oh yeah, remember Saga?
Hmm.
Yeah, they're good. Red
Yeah.
Rider, Glass
Oh
Tiger,
yeah. Yeah.
Honeymoon Suite, Street Heart, Coney Hatch. There's a lot of great bands from Canada in the '80s.
Yes. Yes. Definitely.
Yeah, I also love the underground bands from the '80s, like the Waitresses and the Plimsolls, Lone Justice, the Flesh Tones, the Little Girls, the Cucumbers, and I've
Hmm.
been lucky to interview people from all of those groups on here, except for the Plimsolls. I actually interviewed Peter Case's ex-wife. She played Lana Lang in the first Superman movie, as a teenager.
Oh yeah. That's cool.
Yeah. Do you like the Bangles?
Yeah.
Yeah, my favorite band ever, I'll tell you. I remember lots of their videos premiering for the first time on MTV. Like when I was still a baby, I remember just being bedazzled by that "Walk Like an Egyptian" video. It's so iconic. I heard you say
Oh,
that you love The Cure.
I do. Yeah.
Yeah, what is it
Yeah.
about The Cure that you love?
Oh my gosh. Um, there are so many things I think that the Cure has going on for them, but one of my favorite things about the Cure is that they have so many different sounds and styles that they've explored throughout their career. And I know that, sometimes bands try that and it doesn't go that well for them.
Yeah.
But The Cure is one of those bands that's been able to really evolve and adapt through different eras and try on different types of sounds to their songs. And I love that because they're always interesting. Every album stands apart, and I think that really speaks to their musicality. But it also, to me, it just makes them so interesting because you can go into different moods with the Cure, right? You can do early Cure where it's really punky and dark, or you can do the more sprawling Cure sounds of the late '80s and early '90s. So yeah, they always have so much to offer.
Yeah, I used to do the love song in karaoke.
Oh yeah, that's a great song.
Yeah. Oh my God. I still can't believe it made number two on the U.S. pop charts, and that's their only like top 10 hit in the U.S. And they've done so many great songs, just like Heaven, Boys Don't
Hmm.
Cry, Caterpillar, Let's Go to Bed. God, lots of great tunes they did. Never Enough.
Yeah. Do you
Man.
find that sometimes British music doesn't translate as well in the U.S.?
Yeah. How about see? I heard you say you like the Clash. I love the Clash.
Mm.
I
Hmm.
never understood why they never reunited. But then again, I guess it's one of those cases like with the Beatles. Just let it
Mm.
be.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Now, of course, it's too late, right? Because Joe Strummer is no longer here, which is unfortunate as well. But
Yeah. What's your favorite
yeah,
Clash album? I love London Calling.
yeah, I love that one too. Yeah.
Yeah. God, they were just so groundbreaking, and just like the Police, they were able to put reggae into the mix, and still make it good. I think Led Zeppelin started that in the 70s with Dire Maker. They were able to show people how they can incorporate reggae and still make it sound good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How about Gary Newman? He's making a comeback.
Yeah, I love Gary Newman. I actually saw him play here a couple weeks ago.
Oh, yeah? How was it?
Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah, if you ever have the chance to see him live, I recommend. He puts on an amazing show. Yeah, he was opening for Ministry, which is also, it's a great lineup.
Yeah, it's funny. I interviewed Bruce Woolley, who wrote "Video Killed the Radio Star" for the Buggles, and he did it first in his band, the Camera Club, which included Thomas Dolby on keyboards. And one night they go to see the Tubeway Army perform live in a British pub. Nobody knew who Gary Newman was yet, but he was so commanding and so good. Thomas Dolby turned to Bruce and said, "That's the bloke I want to be." Now, when you think about it, they were both very innovative in synth pop, but Gary Newman was like Bowie. He could be very dark, very moody, whereas Dolby was very satirical and silly, but they were both innovators of the synth pop.
Yeah, for sure. And I think Gary Newman also is, similar when you compare him to Bowie. It's interesting to think about him that way because he's also had different chapters in his career like Bowie did, right? There are all these different eras of Gary Newman.
Yeah. How about the Misfits or the Dead Kennedys punk rock?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. How about them? I don't know. They're bands I don't have a really strong opinion on, to be honest. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I just was never really able to get into either of them for some reason.
Oh, to each their own. Everyone's got their own tastes.
Yeah.
What was your first concert?
My first big, real, actual concert was Smashing Pumpkins at the start of their Melancholy Me Infinite Sadness tour in 1996 in Toronto.
Oh, wow. I had two first concerts. Yeah. I saw Steppenwolf in 1998 when I was 15, and the original lead singer John Kay was the only original member, and so I was looking at the 40 and 50-year-olds, and I can kind of see that the magic was gone for them, but I didn't care. He's very charismatic and he's a great showman. I didn't care. I was entertained by that concert, and then I went to my first real concert. My dad took me to see Alice Cooper. We're huge Alice Cooper fans, and he was magnificent. I mean, it was an expensive stage show in that little theater that had been around for decades, the Warfield.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it was a great show. I've gone to see a lot of 80s bands live, though. I've seen the Tubes live, Night Ranger, REO Speedwagon, Scorpions, Tesla, Def Leppard, I even saw Van Halen with David Lee Roth back in 2012, and Kool and the Gang opened.
Oh, wow.
I know, you don't expect that,
Yeah.
That Kool and the Gang of all people. Do you like Pleasant's band, the Screaming Sirens?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, they are so awesome, so underrated. Yeah, they're so cool. Now, you wrote a book about Canadian punk bands called Treat Me Like Dirt. What sparked that idea?
What sparked that idea? There were probably a few different things. First I was just really interested in what had happened. I was a really big fan of bands like The Clash and The Damned from the UK. And I was always interested in punk history, but it was hard to find out anything about punk history here in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a novel that a Toronto writer named Daniel Jones had written called 1978, and I came across this novel around the year 2000, I think, it may have been 1999, year 2000, and it was put out by a small press, and I came across this book, and I read it, and it's a novel, it's fiction, but in it are all these references to real people and real places, and he references a lot of Toronto punk bands that were active in the late 70s.
Right.
And that was my first inclination that there had been some kind of punk movement in Toronto, and I thought, wow, that's really cool that, the city that I've grown up in had its own punk movement. And so I started trying to find out more information about these bands, and around the same time, some of those bands had a bunch of recordings that were being reissued on a small local label. And so I was actually able to go out and get some of those CDs, and I started tracking down 7 inches and that kind of thing. And the music, I could find the music, but I couldn't find a lot of other information about the history itself. And I kept expecting that someone was going to put out some kind of book about it. So I'd always go to bookstores and look around and just kind of keep an eye out for things. And after a few years, there's obviously nothing coming out that was going to satisfy my curiosity around that history. And so when I graduated from journalism school, I'd been doing a lot of music writing throughout that time, and so I just decided to keep on that trail, and I started tracking people down myself to ask them if they would want to do an interview, and then eventually those interviews became that book. But it was really just driven out of curiosity and being a fan.
Yeah, that's pretty original because, I mean, because I went on Amazon and read up on it and stuff. Yeah, the only Canadian punk band I really know is Teenage Head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're in the book, and Teenage Head's a pretty important band in Canada because a lot of, they played in a lot of high schools, so there are people wherever you go across the country who know Teenage Head because they say, Teenage Head came to play in my high school. And that was something that not all those other punk bands were doing. And so Teenage Head had this built-in fan base of kids across the country. And that's why they're so, so remembered by so many people here.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I grew up on the movie Class of 1984. That's how I first became aware of them.
Right. Yeah.
I've
reference, yeah.
Yeah, I've talked to a couple people from that movie. Oh my God, that was not a happy experience for all involved.
Oh, really?
Oh, let me tell you. Mark Lester, who later directed the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie Commando, which I love, and Armed and Dangerous with John Candy and Eugene Levy, and all these big Hollywood movies, Firestarter with Drew Barrymore. He was clashing with the producers, and the producers were just awful. I mean, if you were an extra in this movie, you could not eat at the craft service table. You had to go eat peanut butter and jelly. It's like they had the stars table and they had the extras table, and the extras table was peanut butter and jelly. Isn't that awful?
Oh no.
Yeah.
That's kind of sad.
Yeah, that's no way to treat anybody who's working on a movie, because it's a team effort. Mm-hmm. You're all working together, That's the kind of things in Hollywood I don't like, and yet this was Canada where it was filmed. So, I'm hoping someday somebody will write a book about this movie, but it'll be kind of tough because most of the people don't want to talk about it, except for the three or four that I did manage to track down. Because my friend Greg Gilbert, he has a podcast up in Canada, and he talked to a few people from the movie, so that's how I got them. And he interviewed Gord Lewis back in 2016 or 17 on his podcast, I want to say.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you ever met Gord Lewis, but from what I gather from that interview, just like a lot of punk rock guys, he was a little, aloof and untrustworthy of, what is perceived to be normal people. A lot of those punk rockers are like that,
Yeah, I did have the chance to talk to Gord several times, and he's in my book. He unfortunately, I don't know if you're aware, he died.
Yeah.
But he was a nice guy. I think that where some of the sometimes some of the guardedness comes from. And I don't know. I can't speak for anyone specifically, but I think that sometimes, what happens to a lot of people within the music industry and in other creative cultures as well, is that they just end up feeling like they've been taken advantage of by a lot of people over time, and they haven't really been given their due, right? And I think that Teenage Head is one of those bands that, those guys work so hard, and they're really career musicians. But I think, unfortunately, sometimes they ran into people who didn't treat them with the level of respect that they should have had.
Yes. Oh my God. Yeah, I always heard mixed things about the Ramones. Some people said, yeah, they lived up to their image of being these bad boys, and they just didn't want to answer to anybody who was authority or anything. I mean, PJ Souls, who was in rock and roll high school with them, she said that they were very nice to her, and she still remains close to the remaining living ones to this day. I met Marky 5 years ago at Monsterpalooza, and he was very aloof like that, like. I get my poster signed by him. He doesn't say anything to me. We get up to take the picture. His handler is taking the picture of us, and he's trying to adjust the screen on my camera. And he looked at me, and the only thing he said to me was, "It's the lens." I thought that was pretty funny. And then after we were done, he gave me a handshake and all of that. But yeah, I mean, I can see, where people are coming from with these punk rockers. Yeah, I mean, I saw Steven Tyler on Joe Rogan's podcast years ago, and he said that, the reason why there was a lot of encouragement for drug use and alcoholism in the rock world was so that the rockers would sign away the publishing and all the royalty rights to the shady people. And I found that to be very interesting, but also I wouldn't put it past them.
That's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, but now Kiss, on the other hand, Gene Simmons, was the sober one. He made sure that he got everything, as far as the rights to everything Kiss and stuff. So he never had to worry about that problem. The other three guys, they struggled with their addictions, but Gene was the sober one, and that's why he's a billionaire today. Yeah.
Interesting.
Now, getting into the 80s movies, I was born in 83. My brother was born in 73. So I like a lot of 80s movies because of him. He recorded everything off HBO between 84 and 88. Like, we had everything from teen sex comedies like Porky's and Revenge of the Nerds and Zapped to sword and sorcery epics. He loved The Neverending Story and Highlander and Kroll and stuff like that. So, like, what 80s movies do you like?
Yeah, I mean, I love Neverending Story. That's a great movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably one of my favorites from the 80s. I love all the John Hughes movies, like Breakfast Club, Pretty in Pink. Those are some of my favorite movies, too. Yeah.
The most brilliant guy there ever was. I mean, you watch his movies, and you cannot imagine that dialogue coming out of somebody else. And, there were times when he let people improvise stuff, but for the most part, they stuck to the script. But either way, everything sounds like it's coming from John Hughes. I mean, that's how brilliant he was and how clever he was.
Yeah, I mean, I think those movies, too, they were, they're quite important in terms of, the use of age-appropriate actors and also the music that they used, right? He helped to introduce some amazing soundtracks to the world.
It was great. Keith Forsey, who wrote "Don't You Forget About Me" for Simple Minds and produced it, he wrote that for Billy Idol, and Billy Idol turned it down and regretted it, so he recorded it for his Greatest Hits album in 2001. I have it. It's a pretty good version. I mean, it sounds like Simple Minds, but with him singing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Do you like Fast Times at Ridgemont High?
Oh, yeah. That's a great one, too. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's a really good movie.
You gotta love that jerk-off scene.
It's a good movie. It has a certain kind of darkness to it, right? Like,
yeah,
it has a lot of highs and lows. But I like movies like that. I like movies that sort of go in different directions. It doesn't always have to be happy. That's often how it is when you're a teenager anyway, right? You have a lot of ups and downs. I think that movie captures that pretty well.
Right. Oh, great example. My favorite teen movie ever is The Last American Virgin.
Oh, I haven't seen that one.
Oh my God, girl, you gotta see that movie. Okay.
Yeah.
Diane Franklin, the French exchange student in Better Off Dead, she she's like the new girl at school or something, and she seems very innocent and everything. And this guy, he wants her, but she wants his best friend, who's a complete alpha asshole. He gets her pregnant, and then the nice guy, of course, takes her to get the abortion, and he thinks he has a shot with her. And then I'm not going to spoil the ending, but it is sad and dark. I'll tell you.
Oh wow. Okay. I'll have to look into that.
It's really, really great. Oh my God, there's a scene where all the guys are having a dick measuring contest in the locker room. And like the next day after I saw the uncut version, finally, me and my friends, we decided to do that. I lost, by the way, I lost. How about Just One of the Guys?
No, I haven't seen that one either.
Okay, that's another one. Okay, when I was growing up in the 90s and even the late 80s, it was on HBO and Comedy Central 24/7. I've talked to at least 10 or 12 people from that movie, and they've all said, yeah, the residuals were pretty good for about 15, 20 years because of that movie being played. Yeah, I'm not even going to spoil that one for you. It is a great movie. Go check that one out. Just One of the Guys.
Okay, yeah, I'll have to look into that. In growing up in Canada, we didn't have HBO, right? I think that was probably something extra that we'd have to pay for. So we didn't always have the same kind of media coming up. We didn't have MTV. We had Much Music, which is our own version of MTV. But Canada has also different rules, so we have to play a certain percentage of Canadian content here.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a CanCon rule, which helps to support Canadian culture. But there's, sometimes we miss things because of that, right? But, living so close to the U.S., we sometimes get wind of certain things that are happening in American culture, but they don't always travel over the border here. It happened with McDonald's toys, too. In the 80s and 90s, but when McDonald's would have Happy Meals, sometimes you couldn't always get certain toys that they had depending on where you were living.
Oh yeah, I didn't even realize that. Yeah, I mean, I've always known that you guys have gotten things later than originally scheduled, and of course, I know you guys got a lot of fucked up shit going on with Trudeau over there now. It's awful.
I don't know if that's all. I don't know. We won't get too political, but I think that there are a lot of you gotta. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've heard things that I think people believe about Trudeau that are not necessarily actually happening. So yeah, gotta take some of that with a grain of salt.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How about Valley Girl?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's okay.
I love that one. Yeah, it's very low budget, but Martha Coolidge, she was able to make a stylized teen movie on such a low budget. And it's funny, Atlantic Releasing Corporation, who made the movie, they spent most of the budget on the music because the music was so expensive that if you watch every Atlantic movie that they made after that, it's all local LA bands, so they don't have to pay that much for music royalties.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah, but that was because the teen movie completely exploded by that point with Porky's and Fast Times and all these other ones, they had to put real music in that movie. There was no way around it, so they did it, and it made a profit. It made more money than they anticipated. So. Oh wow,
that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I love a lot of Canadian movies that were shot in the 80s that were distributed by New World Pictures here in the States. Do you know The Peanut Butter Solution?
No.
Yeah, it's a kid's movie. It's about this boy. I'm trying to remember what happens. He one day he wakes up and he's got a lot of hair, and then what happens is he loses his hair, and then he puts peanut butter on his head and wakes up and he's got a lot of hair and he can't get rid of it, and he's almost like Rapunzel. And he turns out that his art teacher at school is the one behind it. He's doing some kind of a witchcraft thing on him, and I had a crush on the little sister in the movie when I was a kid, and I interviewed her a couple years ago, and it's one of my favorite interviews that I've ever had. She was just like one of the guys, and had a mouth on her, and she was just a lot of fun. That's one of my favorite interviews ever, and I recommend it. I think it's on YouTube.
Okay.
How about Breaking All the Rules?
No.
Okay, that's a dirty teen movie from Canada, 1985, and stuff. It's about two guys looking for girls at this carnival, this fun park carnival that's actually still there over there in Ontario, and stuff. And they meet these two girls, and next thing you know, they're caught up in a jewel heist thing, and the jewel is so low budget, it looks like they got it out of a machine at the fair. It doesn't sparkle quite like it should, you know?
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. What's your favorite movie of all time?
Um, I think I'd be between Pretty in Pink and The Last Unicorn.
The Last Unicorn?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Why The Last Unicorn?
I think it's just an amazing movie. It's a great story. I love the way it's animated.
Mm-hmm.
I think it holds up. There's no other movie like it.
You got everybody from
Yeah.
You got everybody from Alan Arkin to Jeff Bridges to Mia Farrow in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh my God. That I have never heard that before. That The Last Unicorn's the favorite movie of all time. That is special. That is special, Liz. Mine is Back to the Future.
Oh yeah, it's a good one.
Because from the time I was 3, I was looking at my parents' yearbooks, and I've always had that fantasy of going back in time and seeing my parents in high school and finding out why they're so fucked up and I'm so fucked up, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that's why most people like that movie. It's such a special movie, and they put so much thought into it, and it was just one of those once-in-a-lifetime lightning in a bottle things that it really deserved to be the number one hit of 1985.
It is. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense, and what you're saying with those generational crossovers makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah, me and my friend Kristen Frisk, who was a stand-up comedian, very funny girl. I just lost her back in February, sadly. We did this podcast episode where we're talking about PG-rated teen movies from the 80s, and we're guessing who's a virgin and who's not, because when you watch the R-rated ones, you know who's fucking and who's not. You know, it's okay. Talked about, but in the PG ones, it's not talked about. You know, so we both guessed that Jennifer in Back to the Future was saving her virginity for Marty that weekend at the lake in the 4x4. But definitely Marty has at least, slipped her the finger because, he puts his hand on her knee and she's like, stop it, he probably done it in public before. That's just our sick comedic sense of humor there. Yeah, and I even brought that up to Claudia Wells, who played Jennifer in Back to the Future, and she was like, that's a very astute observation, Tommy. So, what made you want to start the 80s Forever podcast?
Yeah, again, I just follow my inspiration, and I've been going to mainly, most of the concerts I go to these days are bands from the 80s, and that's my favorite era. I'm really interested in vintage culture overall. I have been for a long time, and I started to notice just through those two paths that there are a lot of people who pay tribute to the 80s in different ways, and I think that there's a whole culture and community centered around people who love the 80s. And for me, when I talk about loving the 80s, I'm not just talking about people who really like 80s movies or want to just talk about pop culture all the time. I'm really talking about people who are dressing like the 80s, who are in tribute bands, who are writing books that are either inspired by the 80s or are documenting certain aspects of 80s history. So it's really about taking it to that next level and paying tribute to what you love. And those are the types of people who I like to feature on my podcast.
Yeah, when the D&D Dynamite guys posted that they were going to be having you on in the future, I was like, whoa, she's got an 80s podcast? Because I first became aware of you when you were on Pleasant's podcast talking about tarot. And I was like, oh, God, I definitely got to reach out to her now, because I don't know anything about tarot, and stuff like that. And I didn't know much about Canadian punk rock. But then when I found out that you got an 80s podcast, I'm like, yes. I love connecting with the 80s podcasters because we always just have an awesome nerd out,
Yeah, I mean, and again, all these things are examples of how I don't just do one thing, right? How I just sort of follow the things that I'm interested in, and yeah, the 80s for me have become a big part of my life, and like I said, it's my favorite era. It's the era that I tend to always gravitate back towards when it comes to how I dress and the music I want to listen to and the events I want to go to and the community I want to be connected with. Doesn't mean that it's the only thing that I do, of course, but it's one it's one side of myself, and like I said, I just keep noticing that there are a lot of people who feel the same, and it's a really important decade to a lot of people for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, and there's so many 80s podcasts now, but the ones that do it right are the ones that I hear the most. You're definitely on the list now. I've made friends with this woman, Lisa Everett. She co-hosts Pop Ninja podcast. She's been on here several times, and we've become dear friends. And occasionally, her and her co-host, they'll score a great interview with an 80s icon and stuff. And they haven't had one in a while, but they're going to start doing it again this coming spring and stuff. I definitely would reach out to them if you want to have them on your show.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, Lisa, oh my God, she's in her 50s, and she's just this wonderful, bouncy, almost ADD-like, Philly girl and stuff, and she's just a lot of fun, just a lot of fun. And she owns a bed and breakfast.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
Yeah, and she's had the celebrities that she's met at conventions over the years, many of them have stayed at her bed and breakfast whenever they're in town.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh God, I wish I had a business like that. I'd have everybody stay if they came over here to the Bay Area, Modesto and stuff. But I've heard your interviews with Gordon and Drew Arnett from Strange Advance. I think I reached out to him years ago and I didn't hear back, but they were good interviews.
Thank you.
Yeah. So who's on your bucket list?
You know what? I'm not gonna say.
Okay.
I'm gonna keep that. Yeah. I don't like to jinx things.
Well, obviously you don't want to say the living people, but if there's a dead person you would love to have on, who would it be?
Oh, I mean, if I could interview anyone, I think my first choice would be Mark Hollis from Talk Talk, because he's my favorite singer.
Of who?
Mark Hollis from Talk Talk.
Oh, Talk Talk. Yeah, I love Talk Talk. My dad hates them. He hated that song when it came out. Talk Talk, Talk Talk. He hated that. I love that song. I love It's My Life. I think they're great songs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I would want to interview Deborah Ayal from Romeo Void, but I've never been able to make the connection with her, and I've seen her do a couple interviews. She's a character.
Yeah, I mean, she'd be a great person to interview. Yeah, hopefully you can get her.
Yeah, we shall see. I mean, I've interviewed Pete Burns from Naked Eyes, Bruce Woolley, who I mentioned before. I've interviewed Bonnie Hayes, who sang Girls Like Me for the Valley Girl soundtrack. Yeah, lots of good 80s people there.
Yeah, amazing.
There's this girl, her name's Tammy Deaver. She has written these trivia books called Totally Cool 80s. I'd recommend you reaching out to her. She's a sweetheart, very religious, doesn't swear, but she won't cram it down your throat. She knows a lot about the 80s, and she's a lot of fun.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So what made you get into tarot?
It was just something that was always part of my life already. My mom was really interested in different parts of esotericism when I was growing up, and so it was just kind of always around, and I was always really interested in the idea of doing readings, and I do believe that there are other things to life that we can't always see or explain. And so I was just really drawn into learning. And when I was 13, I started getting into learning how to read playing cards and things like that. I didn't get really serious about tarot until I was in my 20s. It does take time and patience to learn, but it was just always something that was part of my life in different ways.
Yeah, my friend Amanda, she's a tarot reader, and the last time we got together was Christmas of 2019. We had lunch, and she gave me a tarot reading right in the middle of the subway, and she said something that in hindsight since then, she was just so spot on. She told me that I needed to stop worrying about my mother's drinking and focus on myself, otherwise I was going to die. Now,
wow.
Irony of irony, I got diagnosed with type 2 diabetes not long after that, and my mother took a fall and cracked her skull open, and she nearly died. We nearly lost her, both physically and mentally. And fortunately, she's recovered just fine, and she's okay now. But looking back, I know exactly what she was saying, And since then, I've just focused on me. Not necessarily been selfish. I mean, I give my mom full attention when she needs it, and stuff. But I knew exactly what she was saying.
Yeah. Yeah, tarot is amazing for that. It can be really insightful if you're open to it.
Yeah. Now, what's the difference between a tarot reader and a fortune teller?
It depends. I mean, I think it really depends on how you're looking at either of those things. Tarot is just a tool. So it's a deck of cards. What differentiates it between one reader to another is how the person is using it and the types of questions that they're exploring with it. So sometimes people differentiate with fortune telling in that they think that a fortune teller is going to be someone who's going to tell them, all about their past, present, and future, that person might predict lottery numbers or might predict when someone's going to get married or when they're, have a baby. It can be very, something that people think of as very future-oriented and, or that might even be considered, more so like entertainment.
Right.
Whereas other tarot readers differentiate themselves in that they say, tarot is for self-growth, reflection, personal insight, personal use. Some people don't use it for prediction at all. But I think that there's a little bit of room for everything in there. It's quite a varied practice. It's quite diverse. People have been reading cards and all kinds of things since the beginning of time, right? People have always been attracted to understanding life and understanding the direction of their life. And they've done readings through all kinds of things, right? People read bones, people read tea leaves, people read the lines on your hands. So, right. Is there a difference between one type of reading over another? Sure, there can be. It's always going to come down to the philosophy of the reader themselves. But can there be a time and place for a prediction? Sure, I think that sometimes predictions can be helpful for people as long as they're not becoming a hinge on their own free will or their own decision making.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it seems to me that tarot has become more reliable than fortune telling because it's always been depicted as fraudulent in film. The fortune telling.
Well, I mean, I think obviously we have to remember what you see in movies isn't real, right? Fiction isn't real life, and unfortunately, there are a lot of things that get depicted in mainstream media that aren't accurately depicted. But there are efforts that some filmmakers take to bring on consultants around certain things. Like when I think about movies like The Craft, which was a huge movie in the 90s and then had a reboot a few years ago. Both of those films brought on consultants to help them ensure the accuracy of the practices that they were depicting around magic and witchcraft. So, sometimes people try to get it right, and when they make that effort, then it's actually not that hard to get it right. But unfortunately, when we're also trying to put something through the filter of entertainment, then yes, it might not always come out as accurate. But we have to remember that, yeah, just because we're seeing something on TV or in a movie doesn't mean that that's actually how it goes. And I think you could say that about a lot of professions, right? We see that with police work too. The way police work is depicted on TV and in films is usually not actually how it goes in real life.
Yeah, not favorable. How many tattoos do you have? You're like a walking art show.
Yeah, at this count, I'm at 50.
Wow.
So yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've been getting tattoos since I was 17. So again, this is something else that's been a part of my life for quite a long time, and I just keep going as I feel inspired to do it. I'm not in a hurry to finish anything, but if there's space, I'll probably fill it as time goes on.
Is the person that you're with all tatted up as well?
No, he has none. My husband has 0 tattoos.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted a tattoo before my car crash, but then after my car crash, they said that ink is not good for my system now with all the scar tissue and everything that happened. I was like, God damn it! I wanted a tattoo of Bart Simpson mooning on my stomach, right? And my belly button would be his asshole, and it's out there on the internet. Like, people have that tattoo, and I wanted it, and I can't now. Damn it! I can't even get a fake one of it.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah, and I've had a lot of fake tattoos, and I will tell you though, oh my God, after they've been on you a while, it starts to burn. That area that it's on becomes so red that it's unsatisfying to have, so I don't even do the fake tattoos.
Mm.
So real quick, we gotta play my secret silly game. This is a series of silly slumber party questions. It's no win or lose, it's just pure fun. And how the game works, Liz, is I ask you the question, you answer it, and then you ask me that exact same question and I answer it. And feel free to comment on the answers because they might be funny.
Okay.
Okay, Liz, are you ticklish?
Yeah. Are you ticklish?
Oh yes, if you tickle me without warning though, I might hit you in the groin. Is your belly button an innie or an outie?
It's an innie.
Nice.
Is your belly button an innie or an outie?
It is also an innie. And I can imagine you probably have a tattoo over it.
I don't. Not yet.
Okay. What color are your toenails painted?
Nothing.
Interesting.
Were you expecting them to be?
Yeah, because you look so spiffy in every picture you're in. I'm like, yeah, I wonder what color her nails are painted.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I never think about painting my toenails. Maybe I will. Do you have what? Now I forgot what the question was. What color are your toenails painted?
Well, my toenails are not painted at the moment. I've been painting them since I was 13. It's just a manifestation of my queerness. And last time they were painted, they were gold with sparkles for New Year's Eve. I like to go very elaborate and bright colored.
Okay, fun. I like it.
Yes. What would you say is your best personality trait?
I'm reliable. Yeah.
Nice.
If I say I'm going to be there, I'm going to be there. Yeah. What's your best personality trait?
I have empathy and I have no filter.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is why I think Pleasant likes me. If you could have anything named after you, what would it be?
Oh my gosh. No one's ever asked me this before. Okay. I think I'd like to have a My Little Pony named after me.
Oh my God.
No?
No, that's cute. That's cute.
What about you?
A vibrator.
Oh my gosh, that's like the opposite of a My Little Pony.
Yeah. I would call it the Tommy Chatsy. It would be like the bathroom buddy in Gremlins. It's got a clit sucker and everything.
Okay.
And then my favorite question, is there a stinky smell that just makes you gag?
I Yes, okay, there used to be, this is a really specific answer, but I used to live in a neighborhood that had a whole bunch of cheese shops that had and in the summer it would get really hot and they would leave their door open, and so you just smell like hot cheese on the sidewalk in the middle of July. Yes, you can imagine what this is. Yes, so that's the one smell that I don't know, I don't know, I love cheese, but I didn't want to go in the cheese shop.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What about you?
Either farts or feet.
Oh, okay.
The classics.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
So do you have any books that you're going to write or any upcoming guests you'd like to mention?
I have a book that is coming out in October. It's called Inside Every Dream a Raging Sea, and it's actually a book of poetry. And it's again, I take inspiration from a lot of different places. So if people are into tarot and magic and witchcraft, that book pulls from a lot of those references. And so that's coming out in October this year, 2024. And that's kind of where my focus is right now, is getting that baby out.
And you don't want to mention probably upcoming guests then?
Yeah, you know what? I'm actually, I'm on a small break at this moment in time, like just today, from my podcast, because I've been quite busy this month. So I have no upcoming episodes to push, but I will have some episodes coming out in the next few weeks. So anyone who's listening today or over the next few days, there will be new stuff. So probably the best thing for people to do is just follow me on Instagram. My handle is 80s Podcast. And I always post about new episodes as they're coming out then. You do episodes by season? A little bit, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I do a whole bunch at once, and then I take a little breather to focus on other things, and then I get back and I schedule a whole bunch of other interviews, and then I just post them as I go so that I have some cushion in between. Yeah. I know how it is. It's funny. I do them year round, but last year I took 2 weeks off because I moved, and I was missing it the entire time. And when I got back into it, I was so friggin' happy. Yeah. It's good to take breaks sometimes, though. It gives you time to also to think about what you're doing and be intentional with your work. Oh yeah, I haven't been on vacation since pre-COVID, but when I do, it's going to be sweet. I'll tell you, because I need a vacation. Yeah. Vacations are good. Liz, thank you so much for coming on today, and I look forward to listen to more episodes of your podcast in the future. You are awesome, and I hope you have a great rest of your day, and be safe out there. Oh, thank you so much. You too. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Right, take care. Bye. Well, there you have it. Liz Worth, ain't she a sweetheart? Oh my God, I love her. She is so awesome. Great personality. A great podcast about the 80s. Go check it out. It's very Canadian, and I love my Canadians. They are just the most sweet, awesome people. Well, until next time, this is Tommy Throwback Kovac saying, there's no shame in living in the past, because the present sucks. Later, dudes.